Hi, today I want to show you how you can integrate Stripe checkout inside of Toddle, and it's really super simple. So the first step that we want to do is we want to actually set everything up on the backend. And today we're going to use the backend Xano. We're going to call the Stripe API in there, create a secure payment link, and then open that payment link inside of Toddle and trigger creation of that payment link from Toddle using an API call to Xano. So let's get right started. So first of all, I actually want to go to Xano and set up the whole technical part for that. So I want to go to my API section and I create a new API group, and I'm going to call this Stripe one-time checkout, right? Because we're going to do a one-time checkout. We're going to charge one time $20, one time $50, and so on. So we're going to do a Stripe one-time checkout. But there are also more resources coming on how to do, like a subscription checkout for SaaS and all of that. But today we're just learning the basics, great for e-commerce stores and all of that. And then I'm going to add my API endpoint. I'm going to go to custom endpoint. We're going to make a post endpoint, and we can call this checkout minus one time, right? One time. Here you go. Checkout slash one time, not minus. Checkout slash one time. I'm going to save this. And now, we can just set up this based on the Stripe API. So I can go to Stripe API documentation and create a session, and I'll see my curl command. So I can add my API key, I can add my success URL, and then I can add my price, my price ID, and then my quantity. Now you can hard code this. You can also make it dynamic. If you want to make it dynamic, it really depends on your use case. I would highly suggest you that if you want to work with a more complex payment setup, that you may consider joining NoCodeProCode.com to get access to our daily office hours, our help forum, our courses, our tutorials, our templates to help you build more advanced stuff, especially when it comes to payments. You want to make sure that everything goes smooth, that the payment the user pays for what they pay, and that they then also get access for what they pay, and that they don't get more access for things they haven't paid, and so on. You want to make sure that it's all properly set up. Payments are really close to calendars and file uploads, one of the most complex things that you want to make sure that you get right, because it is about a lot of money. So, that was my little advertisement in the middle, but let's just go back with a hard-coded option here. How about we just copy that API call, and we just go into our Xano endpoint, and I add my function, and then I go into API call, I go to external API request, and now I go to import curl. I paste my curl command in here, and I click on import. Beautiful. Now we want to create actually inside of Stripe a product ID, and I got myself a fake Stripe account, and let's go to products. Here we go. I go to my product catalog, create product. Here we go. And let's call this Toddle. We're now the unofficial reseller of Toddle. Here we go. Do we want to add a icon to it? Let's see. Do I have a Toddle icon is the question. I have a whist icon. Let's see. Yeah, it doesn't seems like I have a Toddle icon. How about I add this from Dolly? Here we go. Let's make it beautiful. Here we go. We got whatever that is. And then here we go. Now is the exciting stuff. We go to pricing, and I want to go with standard pricing. And this is a one-time purchase because we're using the one-time payment API. And I'll make this 25 bucks, just like that. And then, you know, we can add more information in here, price description, and all of those informations. But now I want to save that product just like that. And now I can go on the price ID and I want to go to edit. And now inside of here, you know, you'll be able to later on edit those things. You can do, you know, flat rate, package pricing, all of that. But that should be it. Here we go. And now we go on the three dots on the price ID for our product and we copy the price ID. This is the product price that we will use in our checkout. So let's just go real quick back to Xano, and I go here, line items price, and in here I'm going to add my price ID. I'm going to update that, and now in quantity, you know, we can have this be 1, we can hard code it or make it dynamic, and then we have mode payment and success URL. We can, for example, have this go to example.com, but you can really have this go anywhere you want and even make it dynamic based on the inputs, but I don't think that we need that. What we need is the client reference ID and to change our API key. So first of all, let's go with the API key. We go to developers inside our Stripe console. We go to API keys and we go to secret key. I'm going to reveal my secret key. I'm going to copy my secret key. I'm going to go back to Toddle, to Xano, and now we have our secret key in here. I don't paste mine yet. Let's just clear this so we know we got to add ours, and we are making it extra secure. I'm going to duplicate this tab for Xano, and I'm going to go to settings. I'm going to go to my environment variables that are under settings. I'm going to go to manage, and then I'm going to create a new variable for Stripe secret. I'm going to paste my value in here so that I don't have to always remember the API key. It's securely saved in there. And then I can go back to my API call. I go all the way down and I'm going to go here. I'm going to go to environment and I'm going to add my Stripe secret. Now I'm going to update this. And now, as we can see, if we run this, we are creating a Stripe checkout link that if I open this, you know, will, oops, I got a 2-finger click, will create a checkout page for Stripe, just like that. But now we have one downside. We don't know who created this checkout page. So we want to pass on some metadata. So we can go to Stripe's documentation and we can look into how we can pass on metadata in here. Here we go. And we should see metadata. You can do a set of key value pairs. So for metadata, we get their documentation here on how to add metadata. So how about we copy this? Here we go. We go back to Xano and we add metadata, for example, organization ID, so that that metadata is tied to the user. I also like to add the client reference ID just to make sure that when I receive the webhooks that I always know who is really doing what. So we'll just do a super secure and double taped approach. So I go in this parameter here. I just cloned the parameter, right? So I have another empty one in here, another empty set filter. I'm going to go in the filter, and now in here, we're going to look how it's formatted over here. We have it in brackets. Here we go. So we formatted it the same way. We have it in brackets. Metadata is in brackets, and we have it in quotes, just like that, metadata. And then we have this being 0. Here we go. Then we have the ID. Oh, we don't need 0 because it's for the whole order. So we have metadata ID. Here we go. And then we have this in quotes here. And then we have this end. Interesting. Okay. Here we go. And then we would add our ID in here. So we have the quotes and the array, and we have the item. We have the array with the order ID, for example, with the metadata, and then we would be able to pass that on. Let's just look at their documentation again. But actually, they don't do it like that. So how about we may don't even need to do it that way. Let's just use their documentation. If we get an error, we know what we did wrong. So we have metadata, and I'm going to call this user underscore ID or customer underscore ID. Here we go. Or actually user ID, because customer ID is already a filled-in Stripe. So let's make this in an array, user underscore ID. So we know which user is then, successfully purchasing that, because the metadata that is tied to the checkout session will come back in our payment webhook. And when we get our webhook back, we then see this data and we know, oh, Mike paid this. So we're going to activate his account, or we're going to ship this out to him. So we got that. We got user ID. And in this user ID now, I want to make a dynamic field. So I just save this. I add an input, and I add user underscore ID. Just like that. I'm going to go back in here. I'm going to go to my metadata, and I'm going to bind this to the input of user ID. Now we just want to be really safe. So we're also going to look for client reference ID. So how about we do here, go to search, client reference ID. Beautiful. Here we go. Client reference ID. How do we make the API call? Oh, I may went to the wrong thing. How about we go back to the create session and we look for client reference ID. Mode, more parameters, currency. Maybe you also want to look into automatic tags. That may be something that may be needed for your case. Expires in locale payment intent data, tax ID, UI mode, or you can even do different UIs. Tax ID collection, subscription data. Okay, update a session. We should be able to do client reference ID. So let's just Google for Stripe client reference ID curl, excuse me, and we're going to see some information here on Stack Overflow. So we have client reference ID. Interesting. How about we add Claude? We ask Claude in a Stripe checkout session API call, how do I add the client reference ID? And we'll see what Claude is telling us and how it's advising us to do that. And I should say, I need HTTPS curl. Here we go. So now we'll see the client reference ID. Client reference ID. Okay, this is their syntax. Here we go, and then we can add the client reference ID to that. So we're just going to go in here. We copy the metadata part, confirm, and then we have another set filter under here, and we make this client reference ID, and that will be also the user ID. So we have 2 points. We have the custom metadata for user ID on that order, and we have the client reference ID that will be the user ID, just to make sure that we know if something goes wrong, that we know who paid. That is super important. I can't stress this enough. I've seen a lot of web apps that use payments that don't know who paid, and they just go by the email the user inputs. But what if the user uses billing at and they use a different email for their payments? Then you have some troubles there. Also, you want to look into Stripe tax, right? We also probably should ask Claude how to make this checkout tax compliant using Stripe tax. In some cases, you want to charge tax. In some cases, you don't want to charge tax. This really depends on the jurisdiction you're in. It really depends on, it really depends on a lot of things. You should ask your CPA or your accountant or whoever is in charge of your taxes or your tax attorney about if you need to use Stripe tax or not. In case you do, I want to show you how to set it up, but this is not a recommendation nor legal advice on how to set this up for your country. I can just tell you from my personal experience, there are use cases I use Stripe tax, there are use cases I don't use it. This really depends on what state the customer is in and a lot of other things. If you reverse charge the customer or not, please talk with an accountant about that, with a CPA that is licensed in helping you with those business decisions. But as you can see in here, you could do automatic tax enabled true, and then you would just add this parameter, automatic tax enabled true. This is everything we need to do to then have Stripe tax in there. You can also add tax ID collection, but we don't need that. So let's go in here and let's just clone the set filter. And in the set filter here, we're going to add automatic tax enabled. Here we go, just like that. And then we go in here and we set its value to be true. That should do it. And now we save this. And, oh, client reference, you pass on an empty string for client reference ID. Oh, I have to add my client reference ID. 123 is my client reference ID. And now it says invalid Boolean 1, automatic tax enabled. Okay. So let's look at this. How did we do it over here? Interesting. Automatic tax enabled true in the set filter. Very interesting. How in here we pass on that information? Do we even need to add a value in there? Because it takes a Boolean. Let's just look at Stripe docs again. Let's look for Stripe tax, automatic tax. Here we go. Let's look at this. Let's look at Claude again. Let's ask Claude, is this correct? I get invalid Boolean. Let's look at this. I apologize for the confusion. You're right. You're right to question this. Let's correct. Okay, let's look at this. Where do we have it? Automatic tax enabled. And if I add a value of equals true, that is interesting. How this translates is it translates in here. Very interesting. Maybe we need to add a filter on here. So let's put this in here, right? And we make this true. But how about what if we make this true as text? Because I could see this be an issue potentially. Invalid. Stripe tax has not been activated. Okay, so if you need to add Stripe tax, what you want to do is if you pass on the Boolean, Xano will turn it into a Boolean. But Stripe needs to receive the true or false as text and not as a Boolean. So you want to make sure that when you pass on the true or false for automatic tax enabled, that you have the true that you type in here and add the text const on there, so that you are making sure that it is, you know, a string. But as you can see, Stripe tax has not been activated on my account because I'm not collecting tax in any other country, and I may be reverse charging my customers. Again, this is how you add Stripe tax. This may be important for some people. I'm just going to hide it so it doesn't do the Stripe tax thing, right? But you want to talk with your accountant, with your tax attorney, you know, to make sure that you are you know, compliant with the tax regulations that are made obligatable to you. But, you know, taxes are a pain. And there are cool solutions like Toddle that take care of that for you. So you don't have to collect taxes. They do it for you under an umbrella company that is like a merchant and authorized reseller for your technology. There is Lemon Squeezy, which is a company owned by Stripe, doing the same thing. There is the one I use, Fast Spring, which their UI isn't the greatest, but they get a great job done, and their technology is very robust, and I see great conversion rates with their checkout. But I also use Lemon Squeezy if I need things that look pretty, that look like Stripe, because of the trust it establishes of looking like Stripe. But here we go, we got that. So what we see in here, we get the request, and we see that my Stripe API key is in the response. So we don't want to return, ideally, my secret Stripe API key to the front end. So what we want to do is we want to copy this, and I want to create a variable under it. And I'm going to create a variable, and I call this, for example, link, because we only really need to return the link. So I'm going to go to, oops, I did not mean to do that. Let's exit this. I go to API1, subpath. I define the subpath. I expand this. I expand the response. I expand the result. And then all the way down here, I will see my URL. I save this, and then I go on the response, and I go to link. And now, if I run this with my client reference ID, I will only get my Stripe checkout session back. And then we can just open that link to then go to the Stripe payment page. Now, I think we can also make this embedded, right? So let's see if we can add that parameter. How can I use the Stripe checkout embedded feature? Because they have the feature where you can use it like an iframe to have something looking like Stripe elements without all the setup that Stripe elements would normally require. And I think ChatGPT or Claude just gave me the wrong thing. So let's look at Stripe's documentation real quick. Here we go. Let's go to Stripe API checkout session. Here we go. And we can go to their API documentation for this. I look at checkout sessions. And we're going to see, yeah, we have mode, setup, subscription. We don't need that. Return URL. They have something with embedded. UI mode, yes. UI mode, the UI mode of the checkout session defaults to hosted. And the checkout session will be embedded as a displayed form on the merchant's website. I want to try that. So how about we add the parameter UI mode and we add embedded. So we could go in here, right, in our API call, and you probably will change the response a little bit, but I can add another set filter, right? And I can call this UI underscore mode, and then I do embedded. Just like that, I'm going to embed everything. And now we run this. Yes, and it says it's not available because, you know, we just hide this and we add a stop and debug. So we can see how the new format looks. It may give us even HTML code back. It wants us to iframe on the site. We go in here. Success URL is not supported with UI mode. Okay, here we go. So we just hide the success URL. And now we get response. Sessions with UI mode, embedded utilize redirects and require a return URL. Please specify return URL or disable redirects by passing redirects on completion. Never. Okay, so we pass on the return URL. That's probably like the success URL. So we just clone our success URL parameter. So we got now a solution for everything. I'll share the template with you in the description below. And they call it return URL. So return underscore URL. And what of a better page could be redirected than example.com/success. So we have return URL, right? Return URL. We save this. And now let's run this again. Okay, what does it say? Sessions utilize redirects, require a return URL. We set a return URL. Oh, we have it hidden. So let's make it visible so it gets passed on. And now, as you can see, I'm going to get my client secret, and I'm going to get a lot of other information. So I have my ID, and I get my amount, I get my client secret, and we could then also take the session and actually embed it inside of a Stripe payment form, like in a Stripe element. So I could take this client secret, for example, and we may stick with hosted invoices because I may get over myself a little bit, but I just want to showcase you all the exciting features that you have with Stripe, because Stripe is like really the non plus ultra when it comes to payment processing. Let's just open Toddle, and I have an exclusive template that is only available for NoCode ProCode members. That is a Stripe payment element, and we have Stripe payments, right? So they can copy and paste the Stripe payment element, which is, the native embeddable Stripe solution. So I could go on my branch here and I can create a new page and actually add it in there. I got my payment element in here, right? And it would load this. So what I can do is I can create a new page with my payment element template that is exclusively available for all NoCode ProCode members. If you want to join, now is a good time. And I can call this a test page, right? And I need to add a name, test2. Here we go. And now in here, I'll be able to add my Stripe payment element in here. Beautiful. And then, oh, actually, that would not make sense because this is already using the Stripe API to create the payment intent. But the idea is inside of the Stripe payment element, right? When you initialize the payment element in here, right? When you initialize this, you are passing on a client secret. Now, this client secret I'm passing on in here can also come from your Stripe checkout session, right? That we are receiving in here to then have like a Stripe element on the page, represent this. But we may be getting over ourselves because this is how to make a Stripe checkout, and we're not working with Stripe elements in here. So let's just, reactivate the success URL and remove the return URL, and we keep everything as is. And here we go, and we just remove the mode, and so that we don't trigger this. And now I run this again, and now we see I'm getting my URL back, and now I activate that I return the URL, I remove the stop and debug, and now when I run this, I'm going to get my URL to then have the user pay, and this is what we're going to use for this one. But I just wanted to explain a little bit how the Stripe API works, and if you want to learn more about the Stripe API, I would love to see you in our community, in our educational membership. So let's copy the endpoint URL, and let's go to Toddle. And what we're going to do is we're going to add a button in here that is going to be, for example, Pay Now. Just like that, I have my Pay Now button. And now I'm going to add my API that will be, I call this Stripe Checkout. Just like that, Stripe Checkout. I'm going to add my API in here. And now we want to make sure that this is a post call because our API in Xano is a post API. Just like that. Oh, I got too many tabs here. So we got that going on. And now I need to add my parameter of user_ID, and we can just hard code this. So let's just create a variable called user ID, user_ID, and we do initial value 1, 2, 3, right? 4, 5, 6, 7, just like that. And now I can go to my API, I can go to the user ID parameter, I'll base it on the variable. You want to base it on probably that the auth me endpoint returns that contains your user ID, but if you need more help with that, we have great educational resources in office hours and in the membership for that. So now if I were to turn on auto fetch and run this, I would be getting the checkout link. Beautiful. So let's just have auto fetch on just for test purposes. We want to deactivate it. But what I want to do is I want to go on this button, on click, and on click I want to call the Stripe API, and then on success of this Stripe API, if it was successful, I want to go to URL, and the URL will be the response of my Stripe checkout API, the data that contains the link. And then we also want to add like a very nice friendly CSS loader and like an icon. So let's go to Relume Icons, just like that. So we have it very friendly, very user-friendly. And we go in here, and I go on money. Or no, actually, let's make a shield, because it's secure payments. Just like that. Let's take like a very nice shield so that they know they can trust us with their money. Just like that. And we go in here and we paste it in the button. And we're going to go in here and we're going to make it on the side and 0.4 rem. Yeah, that looks about right. Let's just make sure that we center everything. And now we're going to make the button very nice. We're going to make it blue 200, and we're going to make the color blue 700, or maybe we make this blue 100. Here we go. Look at this beauty. And now we will also want to add a CSS loader. So I'm going to go on Google and type in CSS loaders, just like that. And I'm going to go on the first. Oh no, the first one is not nice. We go on the second one. That's nicer. And we get a nice CSS loader that we like. We copy the HTML first. We go inside of the button, paste it in here. Then we're going to add a style tag inside of this button. And in the style tag in here, I can copy the CSS and just move it into the style tag in here. Now we got the button, we got to update the CSS a little bit. So we want to make sure that this is like the pixel, like the icon, 24 pixels. Now we got it smaller, but it's pretty fat. So we're going to go a little bit more down, and we're going to see in here somewhere border 5 pixels. We make this border 2 pixels. Now we got it nice. And then we see we have the border color. We're just going to remove the border color so it applies automatically to the background color of everything. Now we got that, and now we want to set visibility based on if the API is loading or not. So I'm going to go to the span holding everything, and ideally I want to go inside of the span and add the style inside of the span, just like that. So I go to my span and I go on attributes, I go on show, and I go on my API, I go on is loading, and if it is loading is false, this will be hidden. So if it is loading true, it will be shown. And then I go on my icon here, and then icon will be show. I go setting visibility, I go on is loading, and right now since it's not loading, we won't see it. So I just add the not filter, because if it is not loading, we want to show it, right? So now if I were to click on here, it's going to load, and then we're going to be redirected to the Stripe payment page. And of course, since we are right now inside of Toddle, we have some issues with the redirections of it. But now let's just go in here, and so in the Toddle editor, redirects, but we can now go on the live side and it should be all working. So I got my button, I can click on my button. I can't click on that button, that is very odd. Let's just double check everything here. On button click, I call my API, and then on success of the API, I go in here, and oh, that API has auto fetch still on, so I need to remove auto fetch. That's the error. Let's go on the page. Now I should be able to click on the payment button. It's going to load, and now I'm going to go on my Stripe payment page, right? And now if I were to type in my email, hey@nocodeprocode.com, and I type in my credit card information, 424242424245, and then I do CVC 4242, and cardholder name, NoCode Procode, zip code 12345. Here we go. I don't want to use link, and now I can pay this. And now if we look in our data for the payment, and I got redirected, right? But the important thing is if we now look at our Stripe account and we look at payments, or yeah, we should be, or maybe on home, we'll see that we made that payment. The payment was successful. In test mode, we go to transactions. I go in here. The most important thing is the metadata that has been added on the payment. This is what we will use to identify who paid, right? Because the email may be different, because you saw I can just enter the email however I want, just like that. But here we go. But if we look at here at our checkout session was complete information, right? We're going to see a lot of data that was in here, right? We're going to see a lot of information, and we see in our metadata that in the metadata, this would be also what you would get back in a webhook. Our metadata contains the user ID, so we know who paid. And now, why we added the metadata as user ID and the client reference ID, because in here we see there is no client reference ID, or actually there is a client reference ID. So we got the client reference ID in here, and we got the user ID in here. But if I go to the different event, for example, to the payment event, right? And I look in here, we see that in the payment event, there should probably not be a client reference ID. There's probably also not metadata. But you know, in Stripe, depending on what events you're listening for with your webhooks, you know, you may or may not get the client reference ID. So we add the metadata for the user ID and for the client reference ID, so that depending on what webhook, because they have like 50 or 80 of them, specifically for what webhook you're looking for, there is a higher chance that you're going to get the specific user ID for the user that paid if you set the user ID in the client reference ID and in the metadata for the user ID. There is a higher chance that this webhook that you're going to receive will at least have one of those identifier in there. Now, for example, if you look at the payment successful ones, you probably will not get them. Let's actually go to Control F and let's look at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And we see it is probably not in here. Yeah, but you know, you would ideally want to look for checkout session completed, because this is where you have all your information. If you need more help with webhooks, there is more in-depth information and resources and support and education available on that on NoCodeProCode.com. Again, dealing with payments is complex. You want to make sure that you get it right, and the NoCode ProCode membership is here and giving you the tools and the resources and also daily office hours. And you know, you can replay all the other office hours. We have an archive now, I think, of over 30 to 40 hours of educational materials on there already. So there's a great value for you in there. You got a great community, you got courses, templates, Stripe templates as well, so that you can even get it set up quicker and compliant. Besides the tax stuff, please talk with your accountant about that. And, you know, just make sure that you fetch that information and you see who paid. And yeah, I would love to see you in the community, but regardless on if you join or not, great videos are continuing to be on this YouTube channel, posted regularly, but even greater content is on NoCodeProCode.com. So thank you so much for joining this live stream here, this video. I really appreciate you all. And if you want to join NoCodeProCode.com, more information are in the pinned comment and in the description. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate that. If you have any questions about setting up Stripe Connect, Stripe Payments, Stripe Elements, please feel free to put them down in the comments. I'm happy to help in here as well. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate that, and see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.